Hello, everyone. This is the one of the last of the three lecture I'm pre-recording for the week when I'm going for a conference, and we're gonna finish up in this video, chapter 4, and maybe moving on to chapter 5. So in this video, we're gonna answer this important question that the textbook authors asked you. Must leisure be pleasant? Well, if you read the chapter, the answer is no, really. It doesn't have to be, it is not. Leisure can be characterized by pleasant and not pleasant experiences. That's just the reality. And it doesn't have to be, it shouldn't be that way probably. Having all pleasant experiences may not even be the best for us, for people you're serving as well in your future job. Now, clearly, unpleasant experiences are common during leisure. And we have already learned concepts and frameworks to look at that unpleasant aspect of leisure as well. For example, earlier in the chapter 4, we talked about excitement and how excitement can sometimes slip into this fear and anxiety side. It's excitement is characterized by the high arousal, and sometimes it just slips into some of the negative displeasure side as well. Flow, we discussed that flow can be accompanied by negative emotions sometimes, or less of the positive emotions, if you will, and be addictive, which is not a really good experience. Sorry, I had to sneeze. Serious leisure, we discussed. It also has, it has many rewards and positive outcomes, but also has negative outcomes or cost as well. And then finally, we talked about passion. Passion has this negative side called obsessive passion. It has a myriad of negative impacts on our life beyond leisure as well. So leisure can be quite unpleasant as well sometimes. You already have these concepts, so you can answer this question, must leisure be present, and no, with the different reasons and different theories and concepts, right? Now, I want you to reflect a little bit your leisure experiences too. Think of a time, describe a time when leisure situation wasn't necessarily pleasurable, wasn't necessarily pleasant, at least in a short term. But then now that you think back about it, you actually think that it was a good experience for you in whatever way, overall or in the long run. Do you have those experiences? And I think it's actually common. So we're going to talk about that a little more. So not pleasurable, unpleasant isn't a bad thing, right? Negative emotion, negative effect does not always mean negative in the long run. For example, overcoming fear can be empowering experience for people, especially people coming from diverse backgrounds, right? So if your leisure recreation park, sports, tourism experience offers some quote unquote opportunity for fear, but really it's supportive, it's done in a way it's safe, then people can be empowered to overcome it. And that can be very, very meaningful experience long run. So, we don't have to always obsessed to take apart any possible sources of fears and their reasons for negative emotions and negative experiences out of our services per se. Maybe we should be focusing on supporting people so that they feel empowered to overcome those negative instances. Now, another example, frustration, which is, negative emotion, stressful, it's not present, can help us make more effort and better ourselves. Have you been in this situation where you're playing some sport, maybe basketball, you're working on a shooting or free throw, let's say, free throw, right? You're not good. Maybe you make one shot out of what, 10 or 20. That's not really great, right? And it frustrates you. You play the game and you get some game time, and there were some chances for your free throw and therefore your team to get extra points and you couldn't get it. It frustrated you. You were kind of mad at yourself, right? And that's negative for the short term, but that might drive you to practice more, practice more, practice more to actually get better at it. So that actually overall, you better yourself, you develop more skills and so on and so forth. And it's good and meaningful in the long run as well. So short-term negative does not mean long-term negative. Another situation where negative emotion is not a bad thing is called mixed emotions. And mixed emotion is the co-activation, co-occurrence of both positive and negative emotions, such as feeling happy and sad at the same time. This actually happens quite a bit if you think about it, and quite a bit in leisure context as well. Let's say your best friends are getting a job or going to university elsewhere, like different province, different country even. You may not see them for next couple of years or even potentially ever. And you're having the last farewell social party, or maybe you go on a trip together into the mountains or something like that. And you're happy, right, that you get to spend some time with them, do some fun activity with them. But at the same time, you are at the same time sad, right? You're happy and sad. And you're also happy for them, their success, right? They're getting a job or getting into university, whatever. You're happy for them, but also you're sad because you might not be able to see it. So the mixture of emotion can happen. You're returning from a trip, very good vacation or something like that. That was very meaningful. That was very exciting. You got all charged up emotionally and you're ready to go back to home. But at the same time, you're kind of sad that this experience is ending as well. Maybe you worked with a team, group, whatever that might be. And maybe you belong to a dance team and you worked as just 1 year, a couple of years, you worked with the same member. You went through many challenges together. You really mastered the art, the dance, different moves and different, choreographies together. And this final competition, and after this, many members going to graduate, retire, and well, there's going to be new members, but this is going to be the last, performance with your current members. That's exciting. That's, you want to do well, but also you're sad at the same time. You may even get a good, first place award and excited, but also sad. It could happen. Now, various and colleagues in their study found that actually mixed emotion, having those both positive and negative emotion, make us feel meaning in life, make the experience very meaningful. And it's very helpful for us as well. It's overall, it's a good thing actually. Of course, navigating through those complex emotions can be quite overwhelming. But if you think about it now, if you think about some of the very memorable experiences, maybe those experiences were characterized by mixed emotions. So again, negative emotion doesn't mean bad thing either. Now, that being said, with that being all said, evidence suggests that leisure is much less negative life domain than compared to other life domains. For example, Chin and colleagues, they found that the boredom, which is a negative emotion, was strongly related to studies and work. Academics learning what we are doing right now. Well, well, least associated with the hobbies, so and other sports activities. So leisure activity is not associated with the boredom much, but people tend to feel bored during studies and work. Maybe you can attest to that. You have personal experiences around that too. So leisure is less negative. Another study by Manel and colleagues with the Edmonton workers, you see this evidence in studies actually in RLS 100 too. But a quick recap, basically they measured a bunch of different emotions across different life domains, especially leisure and paid work. So this blue here, sorry, blue actually, not gray, blue is leisure, and the orange is paid work. On the left side, you can see from 1, never, to, it goes actually up to 5, which is all the time. So, but you only see 1 to 2.2. So for nervous, which is our high arousal negative emotion, if you remember circumflex model of emotion, that's a high arousal negative. You feel about sometimes nervous in your paid work. which makes sense, right? Probably, give or take. In leisure, it's 1.5-ish. So closer to negative, never almost. In terms of dull, which is low, also negative, once again, in work, you feel that sometimes 2.05, in leisure, 1.62. So there was actually significant difference between life domains. So actually people tend to feel more of these negative emotions in work than leisure on average. Now, so that was the important question. Now we are moving on to the last topic of chapter 4, changes in leisure experiences. Researchers and practitioners both in their social psychology of leisure, they realize that on-site experience, okay, something that we have talked at the very beginning, immediate conscious experience, right? Something that is happening during a certain activity in a certain place where the recreation and leisure is happening, right? It's just a tip of iceberg. And what goes on before and after that on-site experience should also be taken into consideration for good research, but also more importantly, for a good practice and good services and good program to happen. You really have to, if you're, let's say, working with the youth and the youth camp, you cannot just work on, what's going to happen during the camp, in the camp space during the camp period. You really have to attend to what kind of experiences kids are going through before, up to coming to your campsite and the program, and then after leaving too. And really tapping into that pre and post experiences help potentially people feeling more positive during your experience and then more satisfied going home with more higher level of satisfaction. So they're going to come back to your service again, and so on and so forth. So really, leisure experience is multi-phased, and understanding of it is very, very important. Now, one of the classic models to examine this multi-phase nature of leisure is coming from Clausen and Ketch, 1966. What? That's like close to 55 years ago or something like that, over 55 years ago. Now, they identified 5 main phases of experience, starting with the anticipation. It's imagining and planning the trip or event, to travel to. So you're actually moving to, whether you're taking the airplane or you're actually driving or whatever, to the recreation site. An on-site experience is, that actually recreation setting, whether it's mountain or a campsite or whatever. Travel back, you're leaving that place and going home, basically. And then finally, recollection. It's about reminiscing, thinking back the experience you got. Now, their model looks like this. So basically, vertical line is the emotionality, if you will, emotional tones, right? The bottom side is a negative, so typically you don't want people to be there, although some of the experiences are, intentionally causing some fears. Like, for example, some adventure activities are supposed to be fearful so that overcoming as a team is good, or children overcoming is good for them, so on and so forth. But typically, you want people to be on a positive side, so upper side, right? And you see these line going up gradually, and that's what the 5 phases really characterizes. And from left to right, it's the time passage. So from toward the right, it's about time moving forward, basically, to your right. So we have anticipation in the middle of the model graph, basically. So that's where people decided, committed, basically after commitment, people are thinking and planning their experience, and then travel to the site. So you see the positive emotion, typically emotionality is moving already, changing that point, anticipating, obviously, some of the positive experiences too. And you hit this on-site experience, and typically there's the peak of the positive emotion in there. And then even before leaving, the emotionality sort of like started to kind of tail down a little bit, decreases basically. And it's traveling back. So you're going home, you leave the space, you leave their recreation site, go home. And emotionality really goes back to the baseline. So there's that, definitely. It will go down, but then there's this recorrection, reminiscing, little bit of emotional bumps, whether it's a negative or positive, and hopefully that would be positive, right? When your customer is thinking back about the experience you offered. So that's a very important part of it too. What kind of experience, what kind of memories do they carry forward, and how that impact potentially their engagement with your program and organization in the future. Now, Hamid tested these 5 phases during his students' trip to a box. It's like a wetland in Michigan. In his study, anticipation was after student received a 1-hour lecture about the trip and bog environment. So that was like ecological trip. There's a learning components to it too. So there's a lecture about the environmental features of that particular space. And then they took a bus together. Students took a bus together to the recreation site. On site, they measured students' emotional experiences halfway through their stay at the site and trouble from, so leaving that recreation place, and they're, in a bus and going home, and the recorrection 2 days after trip. So Hammett basically measured emotions, different kinds of emotion at each of these 5 phases to see whether we see this, do we see the trend that Close and Catch actually predicted. Well, they did. Well, Hammett did actually. So you can see the trend of emotion actually, and the top side, the right one is the positive emotion. So that's what the Crowson and the Catch basically predicted. And it shows this reversed U shape, basically, right? Positive emotion increases through anticipation, travel to, and on site, and they kind of peak at there, and then it drops through the travel back to the baseline, original level, pretty much. And then there's some bumps of positive emotion depending on through the recorrection as well. Now, negative emotion actually seems to sort of like go the opposite way. So it decreases as people went to the on-site and then come back, and so on and so forth. So there is this emotional experiences that people go through before and after as well. So how can we actually recognizing that, how we can tap into, and if you think about it, this is where many companies, for example, in big industry like hotel, airplane companies, those companies are probably capitalizing on that too. They're providing some information, providing some support, technological supports and whatnot. You receive, for example, I'm flying out to my conference site, which is in New Orleans in Louisiana, US. I received some email from air companies and, hey, check it out, do this, so that your travel is going to be smooth. And maybe you want to rent a car in there, you want to check out these restaurants and destination, some interesting tourism stuff that you can do over there, so on and so forth. That helps potentially anticipation, on-site experiences, so on and so forth. After we come back, they provide some, oh, how was your trip, so on and so forth. That, maybe assessment survey comes in as well too. So recognizing this multi-phase nature is very important practically as well. Now, this is the end of chapter 4. And the key message from chapter 4 is that, well, this quote, there is no single leisure experience. That's why we talked about, we went through so many different kinds of concepts, which represent different types of leisure phenomena, experiences that people go through. Okay, so leisure really, there's no the leisure experience. It involves diverse, really colorful experiences. Now, my hope for you as a student and probably future practitioner in the field is that you understand as many experiences possible, because if you are one of those people who just understand, let's say, flow, or I don't know, excitement or serious leisure, that's good, but that's probably not going to help you much as a professional. You will need to, because there will be a lot of diverse types of leisure experiences happening in your service, in your organization. So you would have to be able to capture that with a different language, different concept basically. And with those different concepts, you can pull different bodies of knowledge, different data, evidence, and better your practice. Okay, so understand that, please. And hopefully that will be helpful for you. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing this one and move on to chapter 5. All right, so in chapter 5, which we talk about leisure needs. And needs are the things that basically what we call antecedent that comes before our leisure experiences typically. So chapter 4, we talked about most of the things we talked about in chapter 4 is during leisure, right? But leisure needs tends to happen before leisure experiences participation. And typically that drives people to prefer certain leisure activities, certain leisure settings, so that they can meet some of the needs that are not satisfied in their during daily life. Now, this is an overview of chapter 5. First, we're going to talk about new leisure's paradigm, which you learn in chapter RLS 100 as well. So I'm going to go through it very quickly too. And then the origin of needs and specifically physiological side. We're going to talk about some leisure specific needs. Are there such a thing? We're going to talk about perceived freedom and control because they're a very important part of leisure experiences and leisure needs. And freedom, control, and leisure, how that relates to leisure. And finally, limitations around freedom and control. So there's a lot about freedom and control because we think that those are the type of needs, not just experience during leisure, but also needs. We need a freedom, we need a control to an extent, and that really relates to leisure as well. So starting with the new leisure paradigm. So for those of you who took RLS 100, this is a recap. For those of you who haven't, this is a new information. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit. So one of the first social psychologists of leisure called John Newlinger, he created a model to predict when people feel their experiences are actually leisure or not, right? Now, we're going to talk about it. The chapter talked about it, textbook talked about it, because it's a quote unquote time-honored model. You know, we kind of still talk about it. This is the framework many leisure researchers and recreation practitioners tend to agree with, or tend to have our conversations around. So it's shared, right, within our field. So it's good to know. But actually, empirical research, research involving data and whatnot, using a new leisure's paradigm is now relatively scarce. Like, there isn't much, to be honest. So just a little bit of caveat. Now, Newlinger believed perceived freedom was a core attribute, characteristic of leisure experience, and the perceived freedom is a state in which you feel that what you are doing is done by your choice because you want to do it, basically. Simple, right? So there's that freedom, choice freedom, basically. And it's irrelevant. The textbook clarifies that it's irrelevant if this perception of freedom is an illusion or not. Going back to our earlier example that we're talking about, there's a daughter who doesn't want to go outside, and she's basically manipulated by reverse psychology from the mother, basically. So she feels that she has a choice now to go outside and just go for it, basically. But she actually doesn't have a choice. It's just manipulation from the parent side, but it doesn't matter whether it's in reality she's not having a choice. Actually, she's manipulated. That doesn't really matter, as long as that daughter feels that I have a choice, right? I mean, I'm using my, choice and control and whatnot. It could even the illusion, psychologically speaking, can impact our human behaviors and human experience. Now, then there's a motivation. Newlinger also argue that people tend to perceive experiences as leisure when intrinsically motivated. Once again, to recap, intrinsic motivation is doing something for its own sake. What we mean by that is one's drive, energy for certain, participation in a certain activity come from engaging in that activity itself. So that activity itself is the reason for your participation. Kind of like abstract, definition here. So you play badminton because you love badminton. Basically, simple as that. Now, many people get confused that, for example, intrinsic motivation should be about some energy and reasoning coming from internal side, as in anything related to your thoughts and emotions, right? That's not true, because, for example, we might do exercise because otherwise we feel quote unquote guilty, right? Guilty not to do exercise. So we do exercise. Well, that's actually not intrinsic motivation, because your motivation to do exercise is actually not to feel guilty, right? So that not to feel guilty is it's not the activity itself. It's not exercise itself. Make sense? So that's actually not intrinsic motivation. It's actually extrinsic motivation. It's nonetheless that not to feel guilty is coming inside of you, actually, right? To an extent, it's coming from your mind, coming from your emotions, probably. Obviously, originally it started off somewhere in the social norms and some social norms and discourse around quote unquote we should be active, so on and so forth, and we internalize that. But it's still, so don't get confused. Intrinsic motivation, not internal motivation. If you say internal motivation in this lecture, in exam, in a midterm too, I guess, that's not going to give you a point. Okay, just to be clear. Now, this is the model. This is Neulinger's leisure paradigm. So there's basically 2x2 model. Okay, on the left side, perceived freedom, free, so more freedom to less freedom, from free side to the constrained side, lack of freedom, basically, right? And on the top, horizontal side, we have types of motivation, intrinsic or extrinsic. So Neulinger's propose, based on this model, that people would consider activities that falls into the left top cell cluster called a pure leisure, characterized by freedom and intrinsic motivation. That's the best kind of experience. That's where people most likely to think their activity as leisure, pure leisure, left top. That's the best for him. Okay. Now on the, let's say, top side, so it's still free. You have choice to do or not to do, but extrinsic side. And that's the type of experience that John Neulinger called either recreation or leisure job. It's basically the same thing. Okay, so you may know it as a recreation because I think that's just easier, but whichever is fine in this class, basically. Okay, so that's where you do something for out of choice, but you feel extrinsic. So let's say you exercise, you work out, but not because you love working out, but because you want to feel stronger, you want to get bigger or more strong body, or you want to lose weight or something like that. That's extrinsic purposes. That's extrinsic motivation. It's not the exercise itself. Okay. Now, going back to intrinsic side, but a constraint, so lack of freedom. So you don't really have a choice to do or not to do. You have to do it, but you feel intrinsic about activities. So you love certain things. That's called a pure work. Okay. In this model, work is different from job. Leisure is different from recreation. So be careful about the terminology. Very, very careful. When it comes to Neulinger's paradigm, these things means very different things. Now, pure work is typically where, let's say, in the last chapter, we talked about devotee work from serious leisure perspective, right? That's the kind of things, basically. People get serious about certain kind of activity, let's say a certain art or even like gardening. They turn that into their job. They love still their gardening, but they have to do it because, well, that's the main source of income for you and your family. You have to do it. So there's no much freedom, but it's still intrinsically motivated. Finally, right bottom of the model is called a pure job. And that's according to New Linger's model, that's the worst kind of experience. You have to do it, there's no freedom and extrinsic purposes. So typically many jobs that we do for just the money, for example, right? So it doesn't matter. It's not like you'll enjoy, let's say, pouring coffee at the Starbucks, but you do it so you can get the money and you can buy stuff that you need or you want. Basically, that's a pure job. Now, the question here at the left top is, can you identify an example, your example for each type of these four experiences? Now, I think this is going to be actually the end of this video lecture, and it's a little shorter than other things. So I hope you will enjoy the extra time for your, I don't know if it's a Friday for you because it's pre-recorded, you can watch anytime, or maybe weekend. I hope that you will enjoy extra free time and extra leisure. And thank you for watching these video lecture, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in person again. Bye now.